Well, President Trump says that the new tax law is boosting the economy. In this morning's USA Today, he writes, quote, that on this tax day, America is strong and roaring back. Paychecks are climbing, tax rates are going down, businesses are investing in our great country, and most important, the American people are winning. Larry Kudlow was appointed director of the National Economic Council last month, and in his first network TV interview as part of the Trump administration, he spoke with CBS this morning about the president's tax reform measure.
The biggest winner right now is business investment. That is huge. Equipment, technology, software, and so forth, factories. That's where the real nuts and bolts of this thing, the incentives at a lower business tax rate, both large and small. Now, on the paycheck thing, look, the bonuses are one thing, and that was great. But don't forget, withholding rates are lower, and the bracket ceilings are higher. So that's a combination of fatter paychecks for every single working American, about 155 million people. So I think we're off to a great start.
Let me ask you about China. Where do things stand? There's been talk of trade wars. Then some people have said, well, we're just in a kind of negotiation stage here. Bring us up to date, will you?
I'll try. Look, it's certainly not a trade war. I think of it as a trade dispute. I think both countries would like to settle this. President Trump is good relationship with President Xi. President Xi is a good, able negotiator. Look, everything's on the table. We can't let them keep stealing American technology. That's really the nub of this. That's what makes America the greatest economy, the most entrepreneurial economy. We can't let that happen. It's been going on for 2 decades. That said, we'll see about the tariffs. We've made some proposals. Nothing has been enacted yet. I want to make that point, and probably won't be for several months. Perhaps the two sides will be able to talk it through. Let's see what happens. So far, though, the Chinese are coming back with more constructive reactions. So I'm optimistic about that we'll work things through.
Peter Morici, economist and business professor at the University of Maryland, is in Washington and joins me now. Okay, Peter, I want to ask about your op-ed first off. You have this op-ed that's titled, "Here's Why Trump Needs a More Realistic Approach to Trade with China." Tell me about your concerns with the president's current approach.
Well, the Chinese do so many different things to disadvantage American exports, trying to penetrate their market and to send subsidized products here, that negotiating with them on a sort of item-by-item, industry-by-industry, practice-by-practice basis is just not adequate. We've been doing that for 20 or 30 years, and the trade deficit keeps getting bigger. We've taken a number of rifle shots. We have something like 150 different trade actions, but the trade deficit keeps getting bigger. I think we need to have a wholly different approach, basically require that the trade between the two economies be balanced, and come up with a mechanism to accomplish that.
We look at exactly how the Chinese have pushed back. They're putting a little bit of pressure on pork imports. We've seen that. Sorghum. Have you ever had sorghum, Peter? It's you can
it's
pop
a sweetener.
It's a sweetener, and it's also you can put it in a bag and pop it like popcorn. I made it for the kids yesterday. Nobody liked it, but 179% it's going up. The Chinese announced today. You know, you write that competing with China is like playing football against a team outfitted with guns and knives. Do you think that Kudlow and the Trump administration see it that way?
I think that elements in the Trump administration see it that way. I don't think Larry does, and I want to say that Larry is a wonderfully decent guy and a great colleague who I've worked with for many years. And I think he's pursuing these negotiations because it's what the president wants, and he'll do his dead level best. But I don't know that they really have an end game, that they really have a set of policies that they want the Chinese to accept that will resolve this mammoth and rapidly growing trade deficit with China. It's enormous. It's $337 billion a year. It probably lowers American GDP by a full percentage point each year.
Do you still have confidence, Peter, that this could be the president who turns that trade deficit around?
Well, it depends on how they respond to being frustrated by the Chinese. You know, the kinds of proposals that President Xi is making, he made to George Bush, he made to Barack Obama. This is the usual game plan. What they like to do is they recognize that new presidents have a mandate and they can have a lot of energy and they like to run out the clock. You know, Donald Trump, say what you like about him, he is a very resilient and determined man. I don't think you can wear him out easily. And as a consequence, after they've done the rope-a-dope with President Trump for a while, let's see how Mr. Trump responds. So I'm not willing to say give up on it. I'm willing to say let's see where we go next. But I'm expecting this to go several rounds and to be some significant disruptions as a consequence.
Speaking of a country wondering where we go next, we know the president will be meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe today. Boy, the Japanese have a lot going on. They'd like to see the U.S. return to TPP. They've got the issues with North Korea they'd like the U.S. to help with. They're also subject to new U.S. tariffs on exports and steel and aluminum, despite other countries that have kind of gotten a pass on that. What do you think the president's trade strategy will be when it comes to China?
Well, to China or to Japan?
Excuse me, I apologize, to Japan.
Japan mirrors a lot of China's policies, but there's a big difference here. Japan wishes us no ill, and they'd like to find a way out. If you want to boil down our problems with Japan, they really come down to automobiles and some commodities like steel and agriculture and so forth. I think it's high time we said to the Japanese, you know, we do a lot to contribute to your economic vitality, and we do enormous amounts for Japanese defense, and we need two things from you in exchange for this. We need to balance our trade with you, and that means you need to open up your markets a bit more and accept, for example, American rice. And we need more of a contribution from you on defense, and we realize that may require some changes in your domestic laws, but now is the time, because China's naval threat, because of its sheer size, is like nothing we've encountered before. And as a consequence, given our responsibilities, continuing responsibilities that will be with us for a very long time in the Middle East, our responsibilities in the Atlantic to defend Europe and so forth, it's only reasonable that countries like Japan and Germany do more with boots on the ground, so to speak, and commitment to engage if necessary, and in resources, and I think that should be on the table.
So, Peter, I've also got to ask you, today is tax day. It's apparently the last time that people will ever file their tax returns under the old code. The latest polling actually shows that 27% of Americans think that the GOP tax bill is a good idea. Do you think that this bill is really benefiting the middle class and in the way that the president really hoped it would?
You heard my friend Larry Kudlow. I mean, you should have more money in your paycheck right now because of this tax law. And just about everybody that's listening should have a bigger paycheck because of this tax law. Now, if you don't think that more money in your paycheck is beneficial to you, I don't know why you're happy. But the biggest thing is I just absolutely know no more oppressive thing than our government does than April 15th. All the worries and torture that go into those lousy tax returns because they're so complicated. Nobody got up in the morning and said, how do I make Americans miserable? But they sure do it on April 15th. Come next year, about 80% of American taxpayers will be back to the little short form. Remember when you got your first job in your high school, maybe you worked at a soda fountain or a McDonald's or whatever you might have done, babysitting, and you had your first tax form and it was just a little bit like an old IBM card? Well, that's what your tax form is going to look like next year. It won't be an IBM card, but it's going to be pretty brief and simple. Once they do that, they might start feeling pretty good about this tax law.
Peter, did you work at a soda fountain as your first job?
I have been a short order cook, a grave digger, a school bus driver, a day camp counselor. You have no idea the road to getting a PhD.
You know what? There's hope for so many of us after hearing that. A grave digger. Next time we'll come on and talk to me about that.
Well, maybe we will.
Peter Morici, grateful to have you on. Thank you for joining us.
Take care.